The distinction between the real and the representations of it collapse. And all we actually know are the signs of popular culture and media. So any image moves from being a reflection of reality, snapshot that you take, to a perversion of reality, to a mask of the absence of reality, to pure simulacrum, having no relation to reality at all. The example I have here is by an artist named Gregory Crewdson. He's a photographer, kinda, because what he does is he employs an entire crew of people, and he goes into a town and he gets the townsfolk to be part of this as well, and he sets up these very elaborate sets, complete with lighting. He actually has gaffers, and he has a director of lighting and all this stuff in order to capture an image that isn't real and doesn't really have anything to do with anything real, but it looks like it could have been.
So it's like an outdoor installation?
But the piece of art is this photograph. And the whole point is that, we look at a photograph and we think, oh yeah, that happened. Somebody took a picture of something that happened. But in fact, this is so far away from something that really happened. And the process of getting there is part of what the artwork is about, is that it's really not a real thing. It's this fake thing that looks real, and as an audience, we can't tell the difference anymore. We're at a place where it's not possible to have that unmediated experience if you see a photograph. You don't know. Is it real, or is it photoshopped, or is it made up? And that's part of the point of his work. Okay, another postmodern strategy, hybridizing cultural influences. You guys know what a hybrid is, right? Taking two things and putting it together. Okay, so the process of mixing diverse cultural influences in an artwork is what this is. So, yes, Jessica. I know. So the processes and products of cultural mixing which articulates two or more disparate elements to engender a new and distinct entity. So this is used by artists and theorists who want to disrupt simplistic divisions of complex cultural generalities, like Western and non-Western, black and white, male, female, gay, straight. There's all these ideas, these opposites that our society tries to put up and say, hey, you have to be either black or white. Well, what if one of your parents is black and one of them is white? Then what happens, right? Right? So these are artists that are trying to confront that kind of simplistic, dualistic thinking and say, no. That's not right. So this Cahind Wiley, Jessica's favorite, this piece on the left is the Three Graces, and what he does is he asks people to come into his studio. He finds guys on the street and he says, hey, you guys want to come get your portrait done? And so he's collaborating with them. And they come in and he says, find a piece of art in this art history book, and we'll do a piece like that. So then he photographs them and then creates this work around it. He repaints from the photograph and creates this artwork. So here's Raffaello's The Three Graces, and here's Cahind Wiley's Three Graces. And what's happening is the poses and the context, the pose is taken out of context. You don't have the landscape anymore. You just have this sort of ornate background, kind of Rococo thing. But then the people are carrying with them all of the signs of our modern life. And usually a particular kind of subculture within that. Like these guys are all into sports. Like everything about them has got some kind of sporting association. All their clothes are like that. And that's one of the things that defines who they are and their identity. And so that's getting kind of messed with by putting them in this other context of this old painting of goddesses. You see what I mean? So he's kind of messing with us. And on purpose, that's the whole point. Pretty interesting work. Okay, mixing media. This is also a postmodern strategy. So anybody who's mixing two media in your book, you got it covered. Rejecting restrictive modernist principles about media and materials to freely employ different media in a single work of art, including materials not normally considered art materials. So a piece over here is Robert Rauschenberg called Canyon, 1959. He did a whole series of works. So this is 60s. This is pretty early for postmodernism, but it was a precursor, where he made these things called combines. They were part painting, part sculpture, part real object. So that's a real taxidermy bald eagle and a real pillow hanging off of this canvas. Can you see that? How that's not, this part isn't painted. This is an actual taxidermy eagle that's attached to the canvas. They're called combines. Yeah. So mixing this idea of something that's real and something that's represented. And then some of this is collage and some of it's paint and like mixing it all up. Another postmodern strategy, layering, piling images on top of each other, changing the meanings of each of the images from what they originally meant or were intended for. You can layer text or you can layer images on top of each other. This is a Barbara Kruger piece where she takes a photograph and then changes its context and how you see it by layering sort of an analytic postmodern view of what's happening over it. This is, I think, a pretty interesting piece. We'll keep going. Mixing codes. Okay, so you got to know what a code is. A code in postmodern discourse is a system of a sign and a set of conventions for how the signs are supposed to be used. So like a code might be the way your driver's license is laid out. There's a picture, there's the year you were born, there's the year it expires, there's all this stuff, right? That's a convention, a set of conventions about how they're supposed to use those. All images rely on codes, but usually we're not really aware of them because we're so used to them. Traffic lights, I mean, there's a driver's license example. Some artists make us consciously aware of codes in everyday life and how they shape our perceptions by mixing them together and juxtaposing them. This is a piece, this is not the perfect example, but what he's done is he's utilized code of a circus advertisement. But then instead of it being about a circus, he's replaced the animals, the seals, with very caricatured representations of blacks that to point out how blacks were caricatured and characterized and the prejudice that came from representation. Yes?
Another good example of this would probably be like Lichtenstein, all the comic book stuff.
Yes. Yes, Lichtenstein is also, yeah, Lichtenstein. That's also a very good example because he's taking something that's considered low art and making it into this high art. He's putting it on the gallery walls of museums and things like that. That's true too. That's a good point. That's really good. Okay, recontextualizing the familiar. This is a similar kind of a piece, but when you recontextualize, you don't actually change the objects at all. You just put them together in different ways. So positioning a familiar image in relationship to pictures, symbols, or text with which it is not usually associated in order to generate meaning in an artwork. In this case, Fred Wilson is a curator. He's not actually an artist. He just he goes into people's collections and finds things and pulls them together, and you understand new things from the way he puts them together. So in this case, an old photograph of an African American family from, it looks like the South, and then these dolls, these little like Aunt Jemima style dolls, and posed all the same as the people in the photograph almost. To again, it's the same kind of idea as what's happening in this, is to try to point out the marginalization and prejudice that was inherent in a lot of the characterizations of objects at the time. Okay, intertextualizing signs. Intertextuality refers to the shaping of each one sign's meaning by other signs. So each sign constitutes a text to be read. Strategies that rely on intertextuality include hybridizing, layering, mixing media, mixing codes, and recontextualizing. All these things we just saw, all of those, to some degree or another, are taking one sign that we read a certain way and another sign that we read a different way and putting them together so they talk to each other. So this is a Yolanda Lopez piece. Margaret F. Stewart, Our Lady of Guadalupe. This was a portrait of her mother, I believe. And she's combining the starburst or the flames that are traditionally depicted around Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexican artwork with a portrait of her mother with depiction, Betsy Ross-like. She's sewing the American flag. So she's combining all these different ideas into a single portrait to try to sort of hero it, make somebody who's this regular person a bit more heroic. Or, somebody who works in a sweatshop, for instance, it makes me think of. Okay, confronting the gaze. This one's weird. The male gaze, in quotes, is a term from film theory that refers to the tendency of traditional and film depictions of women to represent women in ways that heighten the sexual or erotic aspects of their bodies, because that was believed to be the way that men looked at women. Such representations usually position the maker, and therefore the viewer, as the active subject, the person who's doing something, and the woman as the passive object. A quote from Laura Mulvey: "The female body in film too often has a to be looked at-ness, like there's a quality about it that it's supposed to be looked at." So this